Action.
Alright, hey everybody, it is our labor and delivery story. So it is Sunday the 17th?
17th.
So tomorrow will be 1 week since we had baby Grayson. So,
2 days.
Huh?
2 days.
Oh, 2 days since we had baby Grayson. Apparently, I'm already...
Wishful thinking.
Okay. So let me, I did 2 updates while I was in labor, so I'm going to be repeating that, but I just want to tell the whole story, so I'm not going to not say what I already said. Plus, there's some things I left out. But, okay, so basically, we start at the beginning. So, we went to that Wiggles concert on Saturday, okay? Saturday before I went into labor. I went into labor on Monday. So, on Saturday, we were at the Wiggles concert, and here's the reason I bring that up, is because while we were at the Wiggles concert, I was like, I think they're using a fog machine, which, considering it's a concert for like 2-year-olds, so why would they use a fog machine? But anyway, I kept seeing weird things. And after the concert, we were out in the lobby of the concert hall, and of course, I was like, I gotta go to the bathroom! So they were waiting for me. And Kyle was showing Sophia pictures on the wall. My mom was there, and you know, we just had a lot of fun. So I went to the bathroom, and when I came out, I was just like, golly, like everything's like slightly foggy and weird. And it was weird enough that I looked at Kyle and my mom, and I was like, does anybody else seem like, does anything look foggy? Does everything look foggy to anybody else? And I expected them to be like, oh yeah, it's the leftover from that. Like, I really thought they were going to be like, oh yeah. And instead they were like, no. My mom was like, looks normal to me. And I was like, oh. So that was weird. So then I just kind of was like, well, I guess it's my contacts, and went about our business. But I was so swollen. Like that night, remember? Like really bad.
Is that the night?
I was just really not feeling good, remember? I felt like ill. And I think I was not... I wasn't really having any real contractions, but the activity I was having, and I talked about this in one of those 38 weeks and 5-day or whatever they were updates. Anyway, so I just didn't feel good, but I wasn't having a lot of action, but I was having kind of these different feeling contractions, like they felt different, but I just wasn't getting them very often at all. And so then the next day came, and so that was Sunday, and we got up, and I was still really poofy, like it hadn't gone down. And up until that point, it had been going down. Pretty much every night it went down, and then it would come back up. So I wasn't very comfortable at all, and everything was blah. But I was okay, you know. And then I was still having just like these random, kind of intense, sharp contractions, but they were so sporadic. They were way, way less regular than any of those Braxton Hicks had been having. So I didn't really give them a second thought at all. But they did feel a little different, which, like I said, I mentioned before. So that night we went out to dinner with his parents. We took Sophia to... Is that all we did that day? Who cares? Blah, blah, blah. So then the next morning, my mom came in the morning. And that Monday morning, I got up and I had this, I guess, nesting urge, but I really felt like cleaning. And I've had the nesting urge before, but it was kind of like, I almost wonder now if it wasn't a real nesting urge so much as an urge of responsibility, because Monday morning it was different. I didn't just wake up thinking like, oh, I should clean or I should do this, and then doing some of it. I literally just went straight into action. You know, got everything clean. I was just like going crazy cleaning. And I was still having those kind of sharp pains, the sharp contractions. They didn't feel that regular to me, but honestly, I wasn't really paying attention to them that much. So then my mom was there playing with Sophie, blah, 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 and then what was going to happen was my dad, he's the boss at where he works, so he can take off time when he wants. So he just was like, I'll come, and he was going to come and watch Sophie. My appointment was at 2:30, and Kyle was at work, and so my dad was going to come watch Sophie. My mom was going to go with me to the doctor's office just in case. And so
there'll be a quiz at the end.
They like the details. They don't mind. I like details when people are telling me their labor stories. I want all the details. I want their actions throughout the day. Okay, so we, and so you probably don't even know some of this. I don't tell him the details. I just tell you guys. I keep it from him. Okay, so anyway, so that was.
I just learned we were pregnant like 2 weeks ago. This has been kind of a whirlwind.
So anyway, so my dad showed up to take over for Sophie. My mom and I left to go to the hospital. And while we were going to the hospital, I kept having, they were a lot more regular now. They were pretty intense. Like my mom was driving and I'd be like, ooh, you know. Oh, like, and they just kept happening. Like,
it's the worst dramatic reaction ever.
That's pretty close. I'm not gonna do it actually.
Oh, well, the ones that you called me were pretty bad. So you actually hear her stop and double over. And
that was later though. We'll get to that. We'll get to that. We'll get to that. So that was after the doctor's appointment. All right. So anyway, so on the way to the doctor's office, I kind of was like, I'm having a lot of activity down there, and they definitely are not feeling great. And so my mom was driving, and every time she'd be like, "Are you okay? Are you sure those aren't real contractions? Are you sure they're not real contractions?" Which is something she's been asking me for the last 2 weeks. So I was like, "No, Mom." I was like, "They're just going to die out like they always do. It's fine." I was like, "Don't worry. They're just crazy Braxton Hicks fake contractions." And so we get to the hospital, and my doctor's office is with the hospital. We get there and to the doctor's office, and we park, and we get a really good spot. My mom and I are like, "Yay." So we go upstairs, we check in, we sit down. They call me in. My mom stays in the lobby. And I go back in there, and the nurse is super nice, and I really liked her. She's friendly. And she had me go leave a urine sample, and then she came back and she weighed me, and I had gained like another 5 pounds, and I was like, what the heck? Like, I did not eat that bad. So I was like, oh, stupid swelling. And then she took my blood pressure. She took it and she looked at the results, and then she was like, oh, hold on, let's do that again. She like straightened my arm out, and she took it again, and she was like, oh, it's high. And I was like, oh, is it? Is it high? And she was like, yeah, it's high. So I was just like, oh, great. And it's exactly what I said. So she's like, okay, let's go to the doctor's office. Let's go to your actual little appointment room. So I went to my little private room and, you know, stripped down, the same old stuff you do when you're this far along. You know, you strip down from the waist down. So I was sitting there, stripped down, waiting, and I was like, oh, my blood pressure, great. And so then the nurse stays with me, or as soon as I strip down, she comes right back and she's with me, and she's like, okay, I need to get a really good listen to the baby's heart rate. So she lays me back, and she had a little bit of trouble getting to it because he kept moving. But then she got it, and she listened for a really long time. Like, they've never listened to it that long before. And I asked her, you know, I was like, why, you know, it's a long time. She's like, she's like, I need to check it to make sure his heart rate is staying, you know, consistent and whatever. So they were basically just checking the baby because they were concerned. And so she listened for a long time, and she was like, okay, it's okay. She said it was strong, but it was kind of like every once in a while was like, I don't know, if she would like kind of lose it. And so we weren't sure if she was losing it because he moved, or if it was like if he was having D-cells. Like, we couldn't tell for sure. And so then she was like, okay, the doctor will be right back, right here. And usually you wait a little while before the doctor comes to see you, but this time the doctor like immediately was like, you know, all right, you know, just, she walked in and she was like, okay, there's, you know, protein, there's a ton of protein in your urine, and, you know, your blood pressure's ridiculous. She's like, we're going to take it again. So they took my blood pressure again, and it was still like high. It was even higher, and I don't remember the exact number. Did I tell you?
No.
Oh, I can't remember what it was exactly, but it was high. I remember being like, whoa. And she, but my pulse rate was really like low and steady, so they commented, they were like, you're really calm about this, and I was just like, well, what's the point of freaking out? And so, but because my pulse rate was low, that made them know that my, I guess if you can give yourself higher blood pressure if you're worked up, right?
Right.
But I wasn't worked up. So they were like, great, it is your blood pressure. So the doctor was like, okay, you know. And I was just like, oh, do you think it's preeclampsia? And she was like, it is preeclampsia. And I was like, oh, great, I got it with my daughter. And she was like, congratulations, you have it again. I'm so sorry. And I was just like, and, you know, then she was just like, okay, you got to go have the baby. And I was like, okay, when? And I was thinking she was going to schedule me to be induced that week sometime. And she was like, right now. She's like, you just need to walk straight over to the hospital. Because like I said, the doctor's office and the hospital are connected. And I was just like, what? Okay. So that's when I was like, can I go home? I live 10 minutes from the hospital. Let me go home and grab my bag and say goodbye to my daughter and everything. And she was like, you know, what if you have a stroke while you're driving? And I was just like, well, my mom's here. She's going to drive. And she's like, what if you have a stroke while you're in the car? And I was like, is it that bad? And she was like, yes, it's that bad. And so, because with Sophie, my blood pressure was high, but they weren't as panicky, but it wasn't as high. But anyway, she was like actually kind of like, yee, go to the hospital. So I was like, okay, and so I went and checked out, and they gave me my paperwork to go check into the hospital, and I went out to my mom, and I was like, we're having the baby. My mom was like, oh, when? And I was like, right now. She was like, oh. So then as soon as we got out of the doctor's office, I was like, okay, Mom, they told me not to go home, but we're going to go home anyway. And my mom was like, oh, I don't like that, and you know, whatever. And I was like, we are, Mom. I was like, I'm just going to grab my bag. I'll be super quick. I'm okay. You'll be with me. And my mom was like, okay. And I knew she didn't want that, but I just really felt like I wanted to run home first. I can't explain it. I really did. So we went and got in the car, and I called Kyle. And he picked up, and I was like, hey, because it's really awkward. It's like, how do you just jump into, like, we gotta have the baby really quick.
Your exact words were, it's go time.
Oh, yeah.
So good job. I mean,
I was like, hey, Kyle. And he was like, hey. And I was like, so it's go time? And he was like, oh. When? Is that what you asked me?
Mm-hmm.
I was like, right now. And he was like, oh, do I need to come home? And I was just really, and it was about 3:30. And so he gets off of work at 5. And I was like, nah, don't come home. And he was just kind of like, oh, okay. You sure? And I was like, yeah, just come home like normal. I was like, it's not. And I told him, I was like, I'm running home first, and then we're going to go back to the hospital. I was like, by the time they check me in and do everything, you'll be home anyway. So he was like, okay. I could tell you weren't exactly sure, but that you were, you know, trusting me. I could tell. Like, how did you feel?
Whatever you said. Like, it was just, I was like, okay. You
Well,
seemed to know what you were talking about, so.
Too much to really, like, absorb.
You told me about the stroke part, I might have.
Been mad at me for going home?
Yes.
The seizure part. He did say his coworkers, though, who were, like, kind of listening in, were like, is it baby time?
Yes, they were probably more excited about the whole thing than I was. More like, baby, baby, baby.
I think Kyle was in a little bit of, like you, instead of like getting all excited, he had to think about the logistics.
Yeah.
Like, logistically speaking, like what we needed to do. I think that's why I wasn't freaking out either, is because I just my mind automatically was like, okay, what do I need to do?
Right.
I need to go get my hospital bag, I need to do this, I need to call his mom. I was going through all the logistics, so it hadn't hit me yet.
Right, it's the same with me. It's just like, well, where am I going to go, and who do I need to call?
What's the schedule, what do I need to do?
What do I need to pick up, and all that. So.
Yeah. So,
the baby's gonna come. That's not.
Yeah.
That's the least. That's
That
already
point,
been done.
Yeah,
you know, so.
That's happening. So let's worry about everything else. So my mom and I went home. My mom was like, it was funny because we were driving home, and my mom was like, what exit should I take? She knows how to get to my house, but there are like different exits you can take to go to it, and so she was asking me which one to take for the speed. So I told her the exit to take, and she was like, okay. And then she started to exit the one before it. I didn't tell you that. She was trying to exit the one before. I don't want to say the one. Yeah. But anyway, she was trying to exit this one before, and I was like, no, Mom, exit this one instead, you know? And she was like, oh, okay, I will. And she kept, like, exiting the wrong exit. And I was like, Mom, you're exiting the wrong one. And she was like, oh. So she was definitely a little concerned.
A little frazzled.
Yeah, a little frazzled. But she was awesome. I'm glad she was with me then. If I had been by myself, I would not have driven home with my blood pressure that high. Like, I just want everybody to know that. I would have definitely not done that. I'm not that stupid about it. So, anyway, we got home, we walked in the door, and my dad was there, and he was like, hey, guys, Sophie's just waking up from her nap. I'm going to go get her. And my mom and I were like, okay, well, we're going to go have the baby. My dad was like, what? And so my dad, though, he was really cool under pressure and everything. He was like, oh, okay. And I was like, so, you know, I just started packing my bag. My dad brought Sophie downstairs. I kept stopping what I was doing to go and hug her and pick her up and give her kisses, and she kept smiling and telling me stories, and I was just enjoying her as much as I could in those last minutes. So my mom was like trying to help. She's like, what can I do? And I wasn't just, you know, there really wasn't anything she could do. So I was like, just play with Sophie. And I got, I packed up everything that wasn't already packed in my bag, everything that was the last minute items. And then I packed up some of Kyle's stuff for him and made sure the bag was ready, got all that done. Made sure I laid out Sophie's big sister outfit for her, whoever was going to watch her, to put her in. And, you know, a few things like that. I left some instructions. I told my dad I was going to call my sister-in-law and have her come over and play with Sophie too. My dad was like, okay, and I told my dad, I was like, we will call you when we know more, just hang out here. And he was like, that's fine. So then my mom and I left, and this whole time this is happening, I'm still having these contractions. And oh, that's one thing I forgot to mention. At the doctor's office, she noticed she was like, oh, you are having contractions. And I was like, yeah, I've been having them all day. It's like, they're pretty intense. And she was like, okay. And oh, and when she checked me really quickly, but she was really hopeful that I was further along. So she checked me and she was like, okay, she was like, oh, you're still only about 50 to 60% of face. She goes, and you're about a 3. So I had dilated a whole another, you know, centimeter or whatever. So that was good, but it still wasn't, you know. But anyway, so that had happened. So we were going to the hospital, and while we're driving there, I was just like, kept having these, and my mom was, I was like, you know, oh, these stupid Braxton Hicks things, and my mom was like, pretty sure you're having real contractions there, Courtney. I'm pretty sure you're in labor. And I was like, wouldn't that be awesome, Mom? Wouldn't it be awesome if I get to the hospital and I'm already in labor? And it was just funny because I was saying that, my mom was totally like, you are in labor, it's pretty obvious.